Warning, there will be spoilers for The Bad Batch Season 2, Episode 5, titled Entombed, and most other Star Wars projects in the Disney era. So if you haven't seen the latest episode of The Bad Batch, proceed with caution. First, I want to give a shout out to one of our viewers for giving me this idea. Thank you, Izzy Sanchez, for the inspiration. I really do appreciate it. If you haven't played the video game Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, then you are likely unfamiliar with some of the things I will be talking about, specifically an ancient race of beings in the Star Wars galaxy called the Zeffo. But hopefully I can make sense of it all for you, and you won't have to play the game in order to understand the story. In my last video, I talked about how the 5th episode of The Bad Batch Season 2 may be related to the Zeffo of Jedi Fallen Order. But what if I told you the Zeffo have been connected to so many Star Wars projects since the Disney era of Star Wars began? And they could be more important to the history of both the Sith and the Jedi than just a fun story in a video game. To top it off, we may have been given clues all the way back to the first Disney Star Wars project, Star Wars Rebels. I know this doesn't make a lot of sense right now, but hopefully it will by the end of this video, so please stick around to see where the story of the Zeffo could be leading. There are a lot of Star Wars fans worried about how The Mandalorian is going to tie into the sequel trilogy. But what if by leading to the sequel trilogy, the lore is actually directing us to thousands of years into the past, even farther back than the Old Republic, the Jedi and the Sith? Let's start with who the Zeffo were. In the Jedi Fallen Order video game, we learn of the Zeffo, a race of ancient beings that incorporated the Force into their technology. They referred to the Force as the Life Wind. They flourished as a culture millennia before any of the events we have seen in the recent events of the Star Wars universe. Without a full understanding of the balance between light and dark in the Force, they persisted to understand the energy field that binds the galaxy together. But the more they learned, the further some of them fell to the dark side. But that contradicted their peaceful philosophy. A civil war broke out, and eventually the Darksiders fell, presumably, leaving just those with peaceful intentions to leave their homeworld of Zeffo in an effort to finally find tranquility in the galaxy at large, turning them from being a culture tied to one planet into an intergalactic presence. Before I move on, a word from our sponsor, me. Hit the subscribe button and give the video a thumbs up. Also, consider joining the channel as a member where you get exclusive perks, including rants and a fanfiction series about different points of view of Order 66 that I'm working on. With that said, let's get back to today's topic. As the Zeffo traveled the galaxy, they would try to set roots on different planets, building elaborate temples and tombs. These structures used puzzles to gain entry into the important sections of the tombs and temples, puzzles that would require Force abilities to solve. But having a knowledge and use of the Force wasn't enough. A Force user could gain entry, but they had to be a strong warrior to defeat the mechanical guardians who lay in wait for trespassers. If a Force user wasn't a strong warrior, they would fall to these mechanical sentries. Passage into these rooms and corridors wasn't something the Zeffo wanted anyone to be able to accomplish, just as our own ancient Egyptians wanted mummies and ancient artifacts to remain undisturbed. The mechanical guardians, which were left for the safekeeping of these structures, resembled the Zeffo in appearance only. With flat heads and hulking bodies, they would emit an energy beam from their chests that would decimate anything in its path. I mentioned the Bad Batch Season 2, Episode 5 in the beginning because we see similar technology in the four-legged mechanical beast known as Skara Null, with the same type of weaponry and design as its two-legged human-like counterparts. With their mission to roam the galaxy, little is known of the Zeffo's whereabouts or if they eventually died off in their search for peace. Okay, so that's what we know of the Zeffo so far. But how does this tie into the larger Star Wars galaxy stories and lore? And how have the signs of it been right under our noses for years? Well, sit back and let's take a look. At first, when playing Jedi Fallen Order, we're focused on just trying to beat those mechanical guardians on Jedi Master Mode, which is the most difficult setting in the game. Running through the corridors, solving the puzzles, and gaining access to the next room distracts us from what the story of the Zeffo has given us long before the video game was released. I already talked about the Bad Batch Season 2 and how it seems to bring in elements of the Zeffo into the arc of a transitioning galaxy. One from Republic to one of the Empire. But wait, this show was made more than 3 years after Jedi Fallen Order was released. As it may be a subtle nod to the video game, it doesn't give us an indication of past shows and even movies being tied into the story of the Zeffo. So let's go to the beginning. The first instance that there is something larger going on. And as I try to make our way down this path, keep in mind that Jedi Fallen Order is canon, and that the story group at Lucasfilm approves all canon projects and even guides creators where they would like those projects to lead. In other words, everything in Star Wars has meaning. But back to the beginning. We're going to start with Star Wars Rebels. Ezra Bridger and Kanan Jarrus enter the Jedi Temple on Lothal. The premise of the story is to see if Ezra is strong enough in the Force to continue Jedi training. Masters have been bringing their Padawans to this site probably longer than they have mentioned. Sometimes the Padawans return from their tests, and oftentimes they don't. But this temple is special, much different from the Jedi Temple on Coruscant, because in order to even enter the temple, the Jedi must use the Force to solve a puzzle. A simple puzzle, but still very Zeffo-esque. Once inside the temple, the architecture also becomes similar. It's similar to the architecture found in the tombs and temples the Zeffo had left behind. There are also inscriptions dotted around that are similar to the same style of writing used in the Zeffo temples. And I'll get more into the types of inscriptions that we see throughout the Star Wars galaxy in a little bit. Once Ezra embarks on his quest, Master Yoda appears before the Padawan and tells him to go to Malachor, an ancient Sith world where a large battle between the Jedi and Sith took place, and it almost wiped out both factions. Once on Malachor, Ezra becomes separated and comes across Maul, formerly Darth Maul. Maul tells Ezra that there's a holocron in the temple that will give knowledge of how to defeat the Sith. But he can't gain access alone. Ezra agrees to help the aging former Sith Lord, and they begin their journey into the temple. But to gain access into the temple, they must complete, you guessed it, Zeffo-like puzzles. Just to clarify, both in the Jedi Temple on Lothal and the Sith Temple on Malachor require the use of the Force to solve the puzzles. Makes sense. I mean, the Sith and Jedi are both Force users and will require a certain amount of Force sensitivity to solve the puzzles in order to gain access to their secrets. But there's more to it than just the puzzles of the Sith Temple. Throughout the arc, we see inscriptions, writings that is very similar to that of the Zeffo tombs. Okay, so the quest ends with Darth Vader and the Imperial Inquisitors arriving and breaking up the fun, leaving Vader and Ahsoka Tano behind to finish their fight. The temple collapses and Ahsoka is presumed dead at this point. Fast forward and Ezra witnesses Kanan sacrificing himself to save the crew of the Ghost. The Empire has also discovered the hidden Jedi Temple on Lothal, and their paleontologist talks about an ancient knowledge and technology that is hidden in what is now the ruins of the temple, tying it back to the ones, or the three. Only he can't decipher the puzzles. But Ezra slips away and solves the new puzzle to gain entrance to what is now called the World Between Worlds, an ancient technology that allows one to peer into the past and even disrupt it, if so inclined. Ezra stands at the gate of a portal watching as Ahsoka Tano and Darth Vader battle on Malachor. He reaches in and pulls Ahsoka from the danger, saving her. But look at the writing surrounding the portal. It looks a lot like the writing we see in the Zeffo temples and the Sith temple on Malachor. This makes us ask, did the Zeffo create the world between worlds? We haven't seen the technology duplicated anywhere else by Jedi or Sith, but the secrets may lie in other Zeffo temples and structures yet to be seen. We do know this technology didn't exist in the other Jedi temples we've seen so far. Okay, let's move ahead. The next Star Wars stories to be released are the 3 films that make up the divisive sequel trilogy. Love them or hate them, we have to discuss it for the purpose of this theme of Zeffo, particularly the Rise of Skywalker. First, there are Sith acolytes surrounding the decaying clone of Emperor Palpatine. We never get to see their faces. They remain hooded and out of focus. Maybe it's nothing, but I'll get back to them in just a little bit. Later, we learn of a Sith assassin named Ochi of Bestoon. Ochi is in possession of an ancient Sith weapon, a dagger. When Rey and company find the remains of Ochi, they find the dagger close to his body. But look carefully at the dagger. The runes are closely related to the inscriptions we see in the Zeffo temples. The whole arc with C-3PO is about translating this ancient Sith language text. Yes, it's called Sith text. And it too may be nothing, but, and here's where we get into the inscriptions, the writing styles, and the languages. The basic language in the Star Wars universe is called Aurebesh, or simply Galactic Basic. When we compare this to the language of the Zeffo, there are similarities. Although the characters are slightly different, the similarities are there. Probably about the same as Old English and Modern English. As time goes on, language and writing evolve. Don't confuse Old English with early Modern English, which Shakespeare and the King James Bible are examples of. An example of Old English is Beowulf in its original form. But as in our own world, the Star Wars universe is likely the same, meaning the languages we have come accustomed to in the Star Wars is likely derived from one language, the Zeffo. And I'm not talking about obscure languages like Shriwook of the Wookiees or the language of that of the Rhodians. Ancient Sith and Basic are Aurebesh. Just look at the similarities in the characters to those of the Zeffo. Strikingly similar. But the biggest clue to the language similarities is in the Jedi Fallen Order game, when Cal Kestis sees a hologram message from the Zeffo sage stating that he is taking his people to the galaxy to finally find peace. Which language is he speaking? Basic. So, even though the writings are slightly different, the pronunciation is the same, meaning we understand every word of what he's saying. And if we know anything about the Star Wars galaxy, we know the writers have no qualms with using otherworldly dialects. Jabba the Hutt, for instance. Even in a video game, we would never hear him speaking in Galactic Basic, only Huttese. Okay, who cares about the evolution of language and where it derived? And so what if the Zeffo were the architects of the languages? Well, that may not be all they founded, namely the Jedi and the Sith. As I mentioned, the Zeffo had a civil war, a war between light and dark, and we have no solid idea of what happened to either faction, only tale that the leader of the dark was killed. So it stands to reason that the Zeffo were the founder of the Jedi philosophies. Peace, what was used to power the four-legged machine in the Bad Batch, a large crystal that has similarities to a larger kyber crystal. And what do Jedi and Sith use as the power source for their lightsabers? Crystals. But it's true that the Zeffo weren't the only ones of their time to use the crystals. Let's go to the Andor series. Luthen Rael gives something to Cassian Andor to hold on to as a down payment for his mercenary skills. A crystal. Not just any crystal, an ancient crystal from the Rakatan Empire, another race of Force sensitives that delved into the dark side of the Force. It was said that they were destroyed approximately 25,000 years before current events in Star Wars. Knowledge from the Rakatan in the hands of a technological race like the Zeffo could be the founding of the Sith philosophies of domination as well as they were the Jedi. So from the writings, the spoken language, and the elaborate puzzles that only Force users can solve, it isn't a far stretch to say that the Zeffo are more than just a quest in a video game. That clues to their importance have been in the stories we've been watching for years. I wouldn't be surprised if there is much more to come about the Zeffo. Maybe even an entire story in live action or animation that dives into the history of the Star Wars galaxy and how the Zeffo passed their knowledge down. Even possibly allowing Jedi and Sith to use their own temples as their own, knowing the philosophies of both lined up with those of the light side peace-seeking Zeffo and the other faction of Darksiders doing the same to keep up their conquest of war and domination. If those are remnants of the Zeffo, it would explain why the Lucasfilm Story Group didn't want us to see the faces of the Sith acolytes surrounding Palpatine in the Rise of Skywalker. Or maybe they just didn't care enough to show us the details of thousands. We can go that route, I guess. Let me know what you think in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I do read them all. And now, another word from our sponsor, me. Hit the subscribe button, give the video a thumbs up. Also, consider joining the channel as a member where you get exclusive perks, including rants and a fan fiction series about different points of view of the Order 66 that I'm working on. But that's all I have for today. Until the next video, this is Gerald, a Star Wars fanatic, signing off, wishing you all great health, happiness, and peace. Thank you all for watching, and remember, this is the way, and positivity in the Star Wars fandom is the only way.